For those of you that don't know me, my name's Dee Gasson. I'm the Principal Officer for Childcare Registration and Enforcement at OFSTED. The aim of this presentation this afternoon, and it'll be a short presentation because I'd like you to do a bit of work on your tables as well so we can get some feedback for you and have a more general discussion. But the aim of the presentation is really to tell you a bit more about the changes we intend to make to the way in which we regulate and inspect early years providers. We want in particular to remind you, or to tell you if you haven't already found it, that our consultation on the new arrangements is now available. So I'll be saying a bit about that and asking you to think about some of the issues that we're proposing to take forward and to think about what that means for you and to give some feedback at the end. My colleague Liz Elson was here this morning, and I'm sure many of you heard her talk about the rationale behind the changes that we're making, in particular the revisions to the early years foundation stage, which will take effect from September 2012. And also, in line with all public sector organisations, Ofsted has to demonstrate that it's reducing resources effectively and efficiently. So that's really the background to the changes that we make. I'm not going to go through all of the key messages in detail, but I do just want to quickly run through some of the main ones, just as a reminder to you all about what the changes will mean for you. Okay, so from September, we're going to focus our regulation and inspection work, as always, on minimising the risk to children, but also balancing with that the need to give providers more autonomy to manage their own service. And I'm sure all of you in the room have had some examples of where you haven't perhaps been able to respond as quickly as you would like to some things that happen in childcare settings because there's a need to come to Ofsted first for a number of things. So we want to try and improve that. As Liz will have said this morning, it doesn't weaken what we're going to do, it doesn't weaken what we'll check or anything like that, but we do think there's a balance there to be struck about giving providers the chance to manage their own service as long as the arrangements are robust and taken alongside our registration role and what we do to take action where we find providers who aren't meeting requirements. Our inspection, as I'm sure Liz will have said, will focus on children's progress, particularly in terms of their learning and development. That's a key issue for us from September 2012, and that's what we're going to ensure we focus on. In terms of what's already been agreed, and we are consulting, but some things are a bit of a given, and in that context it wouldn't make sense to ask you questions on things that have already been decided. So our consultation focuses on the things that we are still developing and are still up for discussion. But we will make our registration process even more robust in the new world, and a key feature of that, of course, is childminders having to undergo their training before we can register them. So that's quite an important thing for us in terms of how we're developing our registration frameworks and what that means when a childminder applicant comes to us and wants to register, that they will need to have done their training. So that's quite important. Most providers from September this year will not have any conditions on their registration. The EYFS is already clear and hopefully will be clearer still in the new version of what providers need to do to meet requirements. So you don't need us to tell you about that, and you certainly don't need to have to come to us and tell us every time you want to change one of your conditions of registration. So we are going to remove the routine imposing of conditions for providers, although we will still impose them where we need to. In line with that thing I said about increased autonomy, we're going to give more responsibility to settings, to the provider, to check their managers and decide that they're suitable. So that responsibility won't rest with Ofsted any longer. We won't be doing the CRB checks, etc., on managers from September. The setting will have to do those as they do for all other staff in the setting, apart from the manager. We'll be doing a lot of interviewing, of course, as we do now as part of our registration process, and when a provider first applies to register, we will be interviewing their nominated person to make sure they can carry out that role effectively and in line with the requirements. But we won't be doing those interviews if the nominated person changes. That's very much for the registered organisation to take forward. We'll be carrying out inspections where we get information that suggests a provider may not be meeting requirements, rather than, as we do at the moment, just investigating that particular matter and publishing an outcome summary on our website. We will be doing a full inspection and publishing a full inspection report, and focusing our inspection on outcomes for children, as I've said, especially in relation to their starting points. This is where I have to put my glasses on because the speaking notes get quite small at this point. So our consultation runs from the 9th of January. We launched it last Monday until the 6th of April. Please don't leave it to the 6th of April to respond, because I believe it's Good Friday. So we'd be very grateful if you could give your response before that date. And our consultation asks the public for their views on some key aspects of our new arrangement. There are a number of elements to the consultation, and you can see some of them up there on the slide. We have prepared an online questionnaire for anyone to complete, and that's available on our website, and I would urge you to go in, have a look at that, make your response. We have already had quite a few responses, so people are going in there and giving us their views. Of course, it's really important that we seek the views of parents and carers in all of this, because we need to be clear that they're content with the arrangements that we're putting forward and that they understand what they mean. So we're doing a number of things to get the views of parents in addition to the online questionnaire for anybody to complete. You may or may not know that Ofsted has a parents panel that we use on a regular basis to ask about our regulation and inspection work, and we'll be using that parents panel to ask a series of questions very similar to the ones that are in our online consultation, so that we can directly get their views about what we're proposing. We've also commissioned a survey of other parents who aren't part of the parents panel, so that we can get that wider view of parents and carers. And we're going to talk to some parents forums that are already in place. For example, Bernardo's have a parents forum, Action for Children have a parents forum, there's a number of others, and we'll be going out and talking to them to make sure that we hear what parents have to say. As Liz will have mentioned this morning, we'll be running a range of pilot inspections between January and April, around 40 settings who've agreed to be part of the pilots to test out our revised inspection framework, and we'll be doing that in 2 phases. So there's some pilots that are going on now. There'll be a second phase in March and April. Once we've completed the pilots, we will be running an evaluation conference to pull all of that information together about what happened during the pilot. So we'll be asking settings who were part of the pilots and their local authorities to send representatives along to tell us about how it went and what needs to be reviewed or what could be improved, etc. And we're going to use our normal planned schedule of meetings and conferences, such as this one today, to tell people about the consultation and to seek their views. We're doing a number of sessions and so on that are planned during the consultation period. So in terms of the aims of our consultation proposals, they are obviously to keep children safe. That has to remain at the forefront of everything that we do. And we're very conscious that we have a particularly responsible role as being the gatekeeper, the organisation that allows people effectively to have unsupervised access to very young children. And we take that responsibility very seriously, hence the need to be absolutely robust in the way in which we register providers. But as I've said, we do think we can give more autonomy to settings to manage their own provision. So, for example, allowing them to work out for themselves how many staff they need compared to how many children they've got, or even the other way round. If you've got this many staff, how many places can I offer? You don't need us to tell you that. That's all in the EYFS, and you can certainly manage that for yourselves. Although, of course, we will continue to check at inspection that you are meeting requirements. So although there is autonomy for you to manage your setting, you will still have to demonstrate to inspectors when they come that you're actually doing that in line with the EYFS requirements. We want to raise the bar in inspection and reporting, and if any of you have been watching news on education websites, etc., over the last couple of weeks, you'll know that our new Chief Inspector, Sir Michael Wilshaw, has already set out that is his expectation. And so we want to ensure that in our new framework for early years regulation and inspection, we will achieve that as well. As I've said, there'll be an increased focus in particular on the progress that children are making in their learning and development, given their starting points, which I think that's very important. We also want to improve the information we give to parents. For example, as I've said, carrying out a full inspection rather than just investigating a particular concern, so parents can see for themselves the quality of the provision overall, and also for providers that puts that bit of information into the context of the quality of the provision across the piece that they're offering. We also want to see if we can make our inspection reports more user-friendly, for example, through developing summary reports. So looking specifically now at the questions that we've asked in our consultation, there are some copies of the consultation dotted around, but when we get into the discussion, I can put this slide back up if people don't have a copy on their table, so that you can see what consultation questions we're asking. This sets out really the main areas that we're consulting on. And we'd very much be interested in hearing your views, and we'll be asking you to look at those in a bit more detail shortly. The first of these deals with what we should do where we're notified of a minor matter in a setting that might not necessarily warrant a full inspection, and how we should handle those. And our proposal is that in those cases where there are minor concerns, where there are no risks to children, that we would pass that information to the provider who has responsibility themselves in relation to handling complaints, etc., in the early years foundation stage. So our proposal is that where there are minor matters, we can pass those over to the provider to look into that matter. We'll write to them and do that, and we will tell them to put the matter in their record of complaints. So that when we go and do the next inspection, we can see how they've handled that bit of information, and we will be checking that at the next inspection. So that's the proposal in terms of compliance with requirements. Inspections notice periods, I know, has been a subject of huge contention for many, many years. In particular, the apparent disparity between early years provision being delivered through schools where there is a short period of notice given, and early years provision that's being delivered by the private and voluntary sector. And we've heard lots of concerns about that. Now, you'll know that Sir Michael Wilshaw has just announced that schools will be subject to no notice inspection in future. That's the way he wants to take that forward, and I know that'll go a long way towards addressing the sector's concerns. So in terms of our proposals on notice periods, what we're suggesting is that they should remain as now, that where we are inspecting a group provision, we will turn up with no notice. Where we're inspecting providers who don't operate all the time or who are not at home all the time, like childminders or like holiday play schemes, which may not operate in every holiday, we'll do as we do now, ring them the week before the inspection to check their availability in the following week. We won't tell them the actual date of the inspection, but it's quite important, of course, to make sure that they're going to be there when we turn up to do the inspection. There's another proposal in the consultation in relation to the early years online self-evaluation form. Now, that's not mandatory, but many providers have found it helpful in focusing their reflective practice, and about a third of registered providers have signed up to complete the online self-evaluation form and have done so and found it helpful. So given that, our proposal in the consultation is that we would continue to make that available to providers who choose to use it. As I mentioned earlier, one of the aims of our proposals is to review our inspection reports to see if we can make them more user-friendly for parents, and we're therefore asking in the consultation if there should be a short summary report for smaller scale providers such as childminders. So in a setting where there aren't, 5 or 6 different rooms that are operating for different age children, where the care isn't organised in quite that way, it might not be so necessary to go into the detail of a full report about all of those things. So one of the proposals is that we would have a summary report. In line with all government departments, we are required to make more of our transactions available online. And we already make our application forms available to people who want to fill them in online. Our thinking is that we could improve that and actually make that service better and easier for people who want to apply in that way for registration, for example. And we're looking at ways in which we can improve the quality and accessibility of our online application system. Inspection, of course, is at the heart of everything that we do, and we know that the judgments we make are of huge importance to people, parents and providers alike. We've set out in our consultation document our proposals for the new judgments, and we've also listed the criteria that we intend to use to underpin those judgments. And we are asking people to tell us whether they think that criteria is right. Do you think that we're asking the right things? Are there some things we're asking that you think are unnecessary? Are there other things that we ought to be taking into account in our inspection framework? And in making our judgments. So there's a consultation question about the criteria that underpins the key judgments. And just to, Liz may have shown you something like this morning, but just to recap, these are the main inspection judgments that we'll be making from September 2012, and the ones that we'll be testing out in the pilots. Of course, I have to say that anything can happen in a pilot inspection, so we need to bear in mind they are the judgments that we put up for the pilots. They may well change, the wording of them may well change, but this is a starting point for us to test out our new inspection framework. And as you'll see, they are much reduced from the number of judgments that we make at the moment. Although I'm sure you'll recognise all of those because they are part of the current, the four overarching judgments are part of the current suite of judgments that we make. We propose to separate out quality and standards of provision into the role of the practitioner in supporting children's learning and development and the effectiveness of care practices in helping the child to feel emotionally secure. So in that overall judgment for quality and standards of provision, there will be two sub-judgments that we will make in our inspections. Okay, so over to you now for some discussion and some consideration of what I've said. I'd like you to think about the proposals and think about the consultation questions that we've asked, and identify what you think the issues are for you in relation to those new proposals. What's important for you? What will you need to change as a result of those proposals? To what extent you agree with them or otherwise, and your reasons for that. Hopefully if we can have some discussion on the tables, and then we'll have a plenary session with more general discussion and questions where you can give some feedback perhaps from what you've discussed. You have on your tables some copies on some of the tables. I wasn't told there would be quite so many people here, so there isn't a copy on every table, but certainly on the tables at the front there's a copy of the consultation documents, the questions that we're asking, and there's a list of some questions that you might want to think about. While you're doing that, perhaps for 20 minutes or so, while you're having those discussions, I'll come round to the tables, and if you have any questions you need to ask me, then please do, and then there'll be scope at the end for some general discussion and so on. If you have a question, can you please wait until you have a microphone, because this is being recorded and people need to ensure that they can hear what you're saying. Okay, so about 20 minutes or so, just thinking about those questions. And as I said, I will put the consultation questions back up on the slide so you can see what they are if you need to refer to them.